Okay, hi everyone. Our next story takes place in July of 2013 on a hot July summer day. A 12-year-old by the name of Kali Hardig. Kaylee loved to swim, and so she was very excited for that day to just get out, go have fun in the sun, something she just loved and enjoyed doing. So, on that hot summer morning, Kaylee, with two of her friends, headed to a place called Willow Springs Water Park. In this place, it was built in 1928, so it was older, but it was a fun family spot. So many activities for families to do. They had water slides. Bottom of this place was all sand. So I know we here in Texas, we have a place, or at least we used to, that was kind of like that. Where it was kind of cool. It was almost like that lake feel, but not, because it's not a lake. So it's like a pool, but just with the sandy bottom, basically. And again, fun atmosphere, slides. They also had grills for picnics and cooking out, all that kind of stuff. So Kaylee went that day, was out all day in the sun with her two friends, had a great time. And when she got back home that afternoon, she ended up starting to have a really bad headache. And so she told her mom, Tracy, kind of complained of it because it was kind of getting worse as the day went on. Her mother, Tracy, just figured, okay, she's probably dehydrated. She was out in the sun all day. You know that feeling. I know I get that way sometimes every summer when I've just had a little bit too much sun, or forget to reapply your sunscreen and drink enough water and stuff like that. So her mom was like, well, I'll just kind of alternate the Motrin and Tylenol, try to help her with that, and maybe it'll help her headache. Well, it didn't help her headache, unfortunately, and in fact, it got worse. She ended up developing a fever of 103 degrees Fahrenheit. So her mother just kept giving her the Motrin and Tylenol, alternating, just trying to get this fever down. It wasn't working already for the pain itself, but once the fever started, you would think, okay, that's going to at least get the fever down. Because at this point, yeah, she's coming down with something, it looks like, with the fever and all. After that's not helping at all, and Kaylee's just getting worse. She's starting to get lethargic. She can't hold her head up. So mom's really starting to worry at this point. She doesn't know what's going on, and why wouldn't the Motrin and Tylenol help, right? So she ends up having to, at this point, rush Kaylee to the emergency room at Arkansas Children's Hospital. And doctors started running all the tests. They even did a spinal tap to kind of see what was going on with the spinal fluid itself, since this high fever was just not, correcting itself. Nothing was helping, and she was just getting worse. I imagine, it must have been like when you get the flu, like the full-blown flu, and you feel like a truck ran over you. You can't get up to eat, use the bathroom, nothing, because you're just done. I imagine that this was that times 10 for poor little Kaylee. Doctors running the tests, and they get the test results back from the spinal tap. And Kaylee's spinal fluid had a pinkish tinge to it, which you're not supposed to have any kind of color, pink, red, blood, anything like that in your spinal fluid. So they knew that something was very wrong here. So going by where she had been in the sun all day at this place, and her symptoms, doctors came to the conclusion, after all the tests had been run, that Kaylee had something called PAM. So that's an acronym, and what that stands for is primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. Say that 3 times. Primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. See, I can't even say it. And I'm a nurse. Anyway, so we will just call this PAM. A little bit of information about PAM. Also, I don't know about you guys, but the word amoeba, it gives me the creeps. I digress. So, PAM It is a parasitic form of meningitis. As most of you know, meningitis, that is an inflammation of your brain. So this is a parasite, obviously, it being an amoeba. And the official name of it is Naegleria fowleri amoeba. The exact type of amoeba it is. So it's commonly found in fresh water and soil. When ponds, lakes, and any body of water and it's really hot and it's been sitting for a while, these amoebas can get in there, and I guess they live in there or something. I don't know. Gross. Anyhow, it's harmful and dangerous only when they make their way up to the brain. Otherwise, if say you're swimming in the amoebas, it's not going to harm you unless you put your head underwater and it makes its way up through the nose and into the brain. That's when these things are lethal. And in fact, that one particular summer across the country of the U.S., I think there were a handful of people or children that had contracted this type of amoeba in these types of bodies of water. It is rare, but there had been some other instances of this type thing the same year, and I think in previous years. It unfortunately did, as her swimming with her friends, I'm sure they went underwater, and unfortunately, Kaylee contracted this brain-eating amoeba. Also, another little fact about that, usually within 5 days, people by the time they first notice symptoms and they wait a little bit because they think maybe, they're just getting sick, that type of thing. Well, usually most people do not make it past the 5 days because that's how devastating this particular amoeba is if it gets to your brain. So this is already looking pretty bad. And overall, also, 97% chance most people also don't make it. Now, your early symptoms are headache, fever, maybe a little bit of nausea, vomiting. Almost sounds like your typical virus or any other bacterial infection. However, with this, it just gets worse. And it eventually progresses to worse symptoms, which can and do consist of later on seizures, hallucinations, loss of balance, all that stuff. So this was already starting to happen to Kaylee at that time, unfortunately. Once it was found out what she actually had, this PAM, this amoeba, a call was put into Dr. Matt Lenham. And the reason they called him was he recently had a case with another child that he treated. So they knew this and they were like, let's call him up. He has the most experience because all the other doctors really hadn't treated anybody with this before. He ends up having to get a special permission. He has to call the actual CDC and get permission to use this new experimental drug at the time that was only available in Germany. So we in the US didn't even have this at that point. So he puts a call in, and the drug itself is called miltefosine. And so they did get approval, and CDC approved it and started to send the medication from Germany to Little Rock, Arkansas. So as they're, getting ready to have this experimental drug shipped, doctors finally have a chance to sit Kaylee's parents down, Joseph and Tracy, and, they tell them all the big details of what's going on, what they're doing, how they're going to treat Kaylee, all that stuff, but they also have to unfortunately break the bad news of what the likely outcome of this all would be. And the doctors ended up telling her parents that, look, most likely Kaylee's not even going to make it through the weekend, according to her symptoms and, past research that they did in a hurry to see how does this turn out for most people that get this. So they break the bad news. And also, they ended up having to put a port into Kaylee's brain. And they did that ahead of time because while they were waiting for this medication to come, that once it got there, they were going to have to give it to her immediately. And the best way to do that, since the amoeba was in her brain, was to put the port in. When the medication came, of course, put the medication straight into the brain to try to kill this thing, get rid of it, right? So that was the plan. During all this, too, there was a little problem as well because the shipment of the medication ended up being lost. So that was probably just terrifying for her family and friends, I can only assume. Luckily, though, or I don't really like that word lucky, but it was a blessing because the shipment ended up being found, sent on its way to Little Rock, and they received it and ended up transfusing the medication into Kaylee's port. Also, during this time, as they're giving her the medication, Mom and Dad take some time to start a Facebook page because you can imagine family and friends with something like this, wanting to know updates, what's going on, what happened. So they make the page to inform everybody as details came in. Here's what's going on to everybody. But not only that, though, it was a support system for Kaylee's parents and Kaylee herself, even though she was put under because, she had to be put under into a medically induced coma in order to have the port put in and everything. But still, it was good support because people flooded in good, positive comments, prayers, all that stuff. So it was nice to have that at that time for her family. And also, it's important, I think, to note that during this time, Kaylee's parents never gave up. They never just threw the towel in after the doctor talked to them and said, well, and I'm sure no parent would, So they told Kaylee to fight. They said, no, we got this. God's got this, basically, and we're going to fight. And so that's exactly what they did, and they told Kaylee. The medication, of course, transfused again into the brain, and then it was a waiting game. They waited, and waited. I'm sure that wait was so excruciating. And actually, on August 9th, 2013, Kaylee awoke. And, of course, she didn't know what was going on, what went down, really where she was, what happened, that kind of a thing. She had spent 22 days in ICU altogether. She ended up saying, "Hi, Mama," one of the first things that she said when she awoke, which was great news, like, awesome. She's talking and she recognizes her family, right? Now, she did have quite a few lasting injuries when she awoke. She did have to learn to walk, eat, talk, so she couldn't talk all the way like she could before this incident. But she was able to learn all those things over again, which is fantastic. Because again, remember, not many people survive this thing. 97% do not. So this, again, another miracle in the books. And one of the articles, too, I thought it was a great description. They explained the brain as like a fuse box. And, it sends out messages of what it needs your body to do. Like my brain, for instance, is telling me to talk right now, or move my arm, or walk, or do this, or eat. Your brain is constantly sending just message after message back and forth. Well, if you think of it as a fuse box, there's little nicks in it, basically scarring. So that was the reason why Kaylee was having trouble and having to relearn some of these things. And as she relearned them, basically what it did is it just rerouted over those little places where it was scarred and torn up a little bit. So as she learned, just reroute right over it and continue on its way, sending messages back and forth to your body. So I thought that was a neat description. And she ended up, making a full recovery and with little lasting effects. I think the only thing was, I think, a little bit of scar tissue was still behind one of her eyes, I think the left eye. And so sometimes she still has blurry vision on and off with that. But as of 2023, this past year, Kaylee is alive, doing well. She ended up moving out of state, and she is now raising her own family. And another great miracle in the books, guys. So another happy ending, which is what I love. And I love learning about these mysteries and how they happened. And, just thinking about the implications of what happened, why her, how did she make it out of this kind of situation? And I think I know. I don't know how you guys feel, but I do believe in God, and I believe He's mighty. And I'll just leave it at that. So something to ponder and think about. So until next time, see you guys later.